Now I'm thrilled to introduce today's speaker, Donna Fick. Donna received her bachelor's degree in nursing science from Berea College in Berea, Kentucky. She earned her master's degree in nursing science at the University of Cincinnati and received her doctoral degree from the University of California at San Francisco. Donna is now a faculty member here at Penn State, serving as a professor in the School of Nursing and the Department of Psychiatry. She is also the director for the Hartford Center for Geriatric Nursing Excellence. Her program of research focuses on improving detection and management of delirium superimposed on dementia in older adults and inappropriate medication use. In 2014, Donna was nominated to serve on an Institute of Medicine committee focusing on the public health dimensions of cognitive aging. Let's all give a warm Penn State welcome to today's Huddle expert, Donna Fick.
Thank you, Paul, for that nice introduction and warm welcome. And thank you to all of you, all the alumni and friends and others who are here today and brave the weather that I'm hoping the sun will come out, but my radar tells me otherwise. So good morning. So I'm going to start with asking you over your cup of coffee this morning to reflect on a question. What is your biggest fear as you age? I already hear some of the, you're stealing my thunder. I already hear some of the answers in there. So is it that you won't be able to do some of the things you enjoy to do, that you'll lose your good golf game, that you're worried about finances, or that you'll be apart from your loved ones? What is your biggest fear? Well, in 2012, and this has actually been repeated too, the American Association of Retired Persons did a survey of over 500 of their members, and they found that almost 90% of their members, that their biggest concern was staying mentally sharp, staying mentally sharp. Is there anyone here that can relate to that? I know I can. I like to tell people that I spend about 8 hours a day sleeping, sometimes less, sometimes 5 or 6. And then I spend about 8 to 10 hours working, time with the family, and then I spend about 6 hours a day looking for things that I can't find. So one of the things I hope to do is to take some of that stigma away today. So remember that thought, is to take some of that stigma of not being able to remember things away. So, and the other issue about this is that this is an area that is growing rapidly. The market for, actually, how is my audio? Is that okay if I move around a little bit? So this is an area that's growing rapidly. The market for brain fitness is worth about $1 billion in 2016, and it's expected to grow. And there are many, many claims about medications in brain, computer games, saying if you take this vitamin or that vitamin, or if you eat 6 squirts of blueberries today and drink 12 cases of wine, that you won't have any memory impairment, right? And that's actually how much resveratrol you need to get those effects. So this report today is just a beginning to the conversation. I would tell you that after a couple of things about the report I'll show you. One is that this is free. You can get this online. The book itself isn't free, but the PDF file for it is free. So you can go to the National Academy of Sciences website if there's stuff that, because this is going to be a highlight of the report. So if you want to know more, just go to their website and you can download this for free. But after our report, which was published in late 2015, Luminosity, who's heard of Luminosity? So Luminosity, the big brain game maker, they actually settled a $2 million lawsuit with the Food and Drug Administration on using deceptive claims about their brain games. Using deceptive marketing, telling people that their brain games would do things like prevent dementia, prevent cognitive decline, and help them do everyday tasks. And so I'm not going to say brain games are bad for you, because I actually know people that are working very hard to try and come up with things like that, and we can take some questions about that. But I will say that be very, very careful. FTC actually has a website where you can look at what claims are actually real. And one of the big problems with brain games is what we call transfer effects, okay? So you might do these brain games and you'll get better at the brain games and you'll look like you're having progress and improvements. But what it doesn't do is to transfer to real world situations, like helping you remember that shopping list, remembering the names of friends, and preventing cognitive decline. So, and again, I know lots of people that are working on this, and I hope they find the magic bullet, but just know that it's not there yet. So again, today I'm going to talk with you about this report. I'm also going to talk a little bit about some of the work we're doing here at the College of Nursing. And then I hope to leave you the message that brain health is better health. Again, the other message I hope to convey to you today, if you remember nothing else, is to take some of the stereotypes and stigma away about growing older and about memory impairment and actually about dementia, to give you another perspective on that. Again, this is our report that you can find. So many of you probably know this, but the Institute of Medicine doesn't have that name anymore. They're no longer called that. So now they're part of the National Academy of Sciences, Medicine, and Engineering. So it's NAM instead of IOM. But these reports, what happens is they bring people together, experts, which I'll show you in a minute, and we usually come together for about 18 to 24 months. I think ours was almost 2 years. And we use the expertise of the experts who have wide range of expertise in pharmaceuticals, sociology, social determinants of health, medicine, basic science, animal science, so a wide range. Nursing, I was, I think, the only nurse on this panel, so a wide range of expertise. But they also have funding, because there are government agencies, but they also have funding. And we also don't just rely on our own expertise. We have workshops, and these workshops are open to the public. So if you go onto their website and there's something you're interested in, you can attend those workshops. And most of them occur in Washington, D.C., because that's where the academy is based. So you can attend those for free. So the statement of our committee was to examine cognitive health or brain health. But the important thing was we were to examine it as different from Alzheimer's disease. So how does our brain age normally, just like other organs, right? Like our lung and our heart, our muscles. For instance, we know as we get older that we lose some who feels like they lost muscle tone? I do every day. So the brain is no different, right? So the brain is an organ too. So our task was to figure this out. And I'll just tell you, it was a big task and we haven't figured it out yet. This is just quickly our committee, again, to show you. Dan Blazer is aging himself. He's in his late 70s, and he's a psychiatrist at Duke and one of the world's experts in a lot of this. People from medicine, again, there's basic scientists there, there's animal model researchers there. Art Kramer, who's at the University of Illinois, Urbana, he's one of the, has a lot of expertise in brain games. And one of the things they're doing people simulating nature, so seeing if we can improve their brain with nature. So he has some expertise in this. And it's not just things like physical activity, but maybe doing physical activity while you're subtracting, doing math problems. So think about that the next time you're in the shower. So what is cognitive aging? That was believe it or not, that was part of our task, is to say, what really is cognitive aging? So it refers to things like attention, because most people, I'm just going to say that a lot of people, when I talk to them about cognitive aging, they think of one thing. What's that? Alzheimer's, memory, but they think about memory. So the other thing to remember is cognition is a lot more than memory. It's thinking, it's language, it's solving problems, it's making decisions, financial decisions. And so those are some of the things we see with memory impairment or with dementia and cognitive impairment. Is not just memory, but people making decisions. The other thing that's very important to say for all of us, including myself who's over 50, is that this is a process that's gradual, it's ongoing, and it's highly variable. And I'm going to show you a chart like that in a moment. It's a lifelong disease, or it's a lifelong process, and it's not a disease. That's very important for me to say. This is not a disease. And so what we should go for is thinking about cognitive health is having the best function over time. So think about that a minute. That's highly impacted by what? Culture, education, income level, others, what we call sort of social determinants of health. It's highly, highly variable. You'll get to see his picture at the end, but I have an adult son who has Down syndrome. And so his cognitive health, his intellectual disability might be different than some of you sitting here. But preserving optimal health and cognitive function for him is no different, and it's just as important. So think of it as highly variable in how do we maintain the best function for all of us over time in the absence of a disease like Alzheimer's. The other thing to think about is having a healthy brain is not the same as Alzheimer's disease. Again, cognitive aging is part of aging. You know, maybe this is good, maybe this is bad news for you, but I think it's actually good news, is that the brain ages just like any other organ. And just like any other organ, we need to think about keeping it healthy. In Alzheimer's disease, we see extensive neuron loss. But actually, in aging, the number of neurons stay relatively stable. And we know there are things that we can do to help our neuron health, which we'll talk about in a minute, and also to help the what we call the synapses, how the neurons communicate. So there are many things we could do. And again, cognitive aging is very variable. So here's the chart, and I promise not to have too many of these, but I like this one because the individual dots, this is the health and retirement study, and this is 500 older adults that they followed from 60 years old to 100, okay? And the individual dots they represent how people varied over time, okay? The orange line is sort of the average. And so where is the average going as we get older? Down, down. So maybe you think that's bad news, but we'll talk more about that. And then the blue lines represent standard deviations from the average. So the above blue line are people who are doing better and then people who are worse. And we already talked about reasons why people might do worse, and we'll talk about more of those, or why people might do better. But why I like this slide is if you follow the individual lines, you'll see that even 90-year-olds improve their cognition over time. Now we know, and we should compensate for it, that there are things that decline. For instance, processing speed and memory decline as we get older. It just does. And so we need to think of ways to compensate. And that means that it takes longer for us to process information, and we might need longer, so people may need to give us longer to respond. I tell my kids that all the time. Give me a minute to respond. And then the answer will be maybe. But the other thing I want to say, and again, I'll probably have about 3 points that I want you to walk out of here today and remember. So the other thing that I'll say is aging can be wonderful because there are things that improve with age. Does anybody have any idea what that might be? Expertise, right. Crystallized intelligence. So intelligence that comes with experience. You're way ahead of my teenagers, I can tell you that for sure. The other thing that is being studied extensively right now, and the National Institute of Health and National Institute of Aging is putting money into this, is resilience. So we know that we can learn a lot from older adults about resilience. And then also wisdom. The other thing, and this may surprise you, is stress response. And I'm not going to talk about this today, but there's a whole group at Penn State that do work on stress diaries. Are any of you involved in that? And one of the things they found was that older adults are better with dealing with little daily stresses. So, and the issue would be that, you know, when you're younger and someone cuts you off in traffic, you know, maybe you have a little road rage or anger, or I'm trying to think what else. Someone loses a job and it's the end of the world. But as we get older, we realize, you know what, the world didn't end. The world didn't end, and we learn how to deal with the stresses that are minor versus those that are really important. And then I'll say that there are a lot that in this report, we learned a lot, but we also left with knowing we have a ton to still learn. You know, The other thing is that people, particularly pharmaceutical marketing, likes to make us think that we understand the brain. That is absolutely not true. Guess what? We don't even understand Alzheimer's disease, the neuropathology yet of Alzheimer's disease, and that's why so many drugs have failed. So we still have a ton to learn, and the NIH is putting a lot of money. Matter of fact, they're putting an unprecedented amount of money right now into understanding Alzheimer's disease, so that's also the good. I guess the baby boomers told them, look, 90% of us are worried about this, right? So someone heard. But these are all the things that make a difference, that make it difficult. The range of ages, so, some 70-year-olds will age very different than others, right? Some 50-year-olds will age like an 80-year-old. So there's a wide range of how people age. Medical conditions, right, interfere with our cognition, maybe having diabetes or renal disease or liver disease or cancer, all those things, heart disease can interfere with these things. And then that there were a lack of randomized controlled trial. The other thing that we found from this report is that because of that, we cannot rely on just a standardized test to tell us what people's cognition are. And that's important to remember because of all these things that are interacting with that. So what's the message to that? It's not that you shouldn't be tested, but that you shouldn't rely on just one test. That cognition is something that we should measure over time. And the other thing I'll say is that even though I'm a gerontologist, I'm the director of our center, and we have actually some flyers about our center, and we have free seminars. But so I focus on older adults. But the other thing we know about cognition is guess where it starts? Where do you think aging brain starts? Does it start when you're 50 or 70? Yeah. In utero, really, in utero. So the other thing we learned from this report is that you have to think of cognition as a lifetime process. So do we have our 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds exercising? Do we have our teenagers exercising? What are they putting into their bodies? Those sort of things. Again, we looked at all this stuff in the report, and I won't have time to go over it all today, but alcohol use, smoking, diet, social engagement, which I will talk about. Air pollution, guess what? That's bad for your brain, and occupational exposures. I am going to traumatic brain injury, that if we're at a football game, we have to talk about that one, that's an important area. And they're doing some fabulous work on that in trying to understand concussions better. That it's really could be more about the twisting of the brain more than the actual impact. So there's a lot we're trying to understand about that. I'm going to talk a lot about delirium and hospitalization today and how that impacts your brain. The report did come up with a list of 10 recommendations. This is an example. So when the National Academy of Science does a report, they actually make policy recommendations, research recommendations, practice recommendations, and they make consumer recommendations. And I'll share some of the consumer ones. But one of the things that they recommend was that we actually have policies for over-the-counter medications that may affect cognitive function. Because what we realize is that we focus a lot on prescription medications, but with older adults, there are some that are heavily marketed, and I'm going to give you an example of that. Diphenhydramine. So that's one where we, and now I'm blanking on, but Tylenol PM, that would be. So Tylenol PM. It's not just Tylenol, it has diphenhydramine. And I never tell you to stop taking a medication, but I'm telling you that was one example where we wanted people to be cautious about what those kind of drugs can do to your brain. They can also make you fall. We also had research recommendations, a lot of research recommendations. But then these are the consumer recommendations that I'm going to focus on a little bit more today. And these, is anybody surprised by these? So the National Institute of Aging, I told you I wasn't going to talk about dementia, but I will a little because it's hard to talk about a healthy brain without talking about that. But the National Institute of Aging put out a report. This was actually a couple years ago already. And they looked at everything that's been done with Alzheimer's disease. So it's actually billions of dollars that we put into drugs, right? And they came up with a consensus report. And they said, what can we do to protect the brain? Well, guess what? Not one pill was on there. There's not one pill that they recommend. But the one sort of prescription that they recommend was to be physically active. So it refers to both dementia and to brain health. And we're going to talk more about how you can do that, especially as an older adult. The other is, what's good for the heart is good for the brain. So reduce your cardiovascular risk factors like high blood pressure, diabetes, heart conditions. And then lastly, manage your medications. One of my other areas of expertise is medication, so I'm going to talk a lot about that today, and we'll give you some examples. Healthy eating. The two diets that have been studied the most are the Mediterranean and the DASH diet. I'll just keep it simple and say, don't eat too much. Eat lots of fruits, vegetables, nuts. Try to reduce your consumption of fats and meats. Keep your brain active, and we'll talk more about this. But again, I won't tell you to stop doing brain games if you're doing them. But I will tell you that right now the evidence says that they don't prevent your brain. They don't improve brain health, and they don't prevent dementia or cognitive decline. But what you can do is do new activities. So be a volunteer, join a book club, do crossword puzzles if you enjoy them, take up piano for the first time in your life, or try a new language. Come to talks like this. But definitely get out. Regular exercise, and we're going to talk more about that, is make sure that if you are exercising for the first time, of course, that you consult with a healthcare provider, that you just don't go out there and try and run a marathon for the first time. So let's talk about the right dose, because I think that's important. Because I think people think that, well, gosh, I can't exercise. I can't go out. I can't walk an hour every day, or I can't run, or I can't do this or that. I love this study. It was published in PLOS One. And if you're interested, just email me and I'll send it to you. And this is an area that's also getting a lot more studies, so you'll see more. But I like this one because it sends the right message. This was a rigorous randomized controlled trial, and they had older adults doing brisk walking. So just walking, not running, not sprinting. And they had 3 different groups, so I won't get this completely right, but they had a group that did like 400 minutes a week, and then they had a group that did like 200, and then they had a group that did like 75. So only like 10 to 15 minutes a day, right? And they did very rigorous tests to see how their heart and lungs were and to see how their brains were. Well, those who exercised the most, guess what? They had a lot more gains in their heart and lung, right? Than those who just did like 10 minutes of walking a day. But when they looked at brain health, those who only did brisk walking for like 10 minutes a day had the same gains in those things that I just told you declined, like memory, processing speed, being able to solve problems. So the message is to keep moving. And I think I'll show you this again, but this is so important that when we have people in hospitals, even in the intensive care unit at Johns Hopkins or Vanderbilt who specialize in this, they have people that are on a ventilator, people in their 70s and 80s riding bicycles in the bed. Does that surprise anyone? That's how important it is to keep moving. The other area in terms of your brain is to avoid these drugs that we know have a central nervous system action. So to find out about that, you can go to www.healthandaging.org. This is a non-profit organization that's associated with the American Geriatric Society, where I'm on the board. And I've been involved with these since, like 10 years, something like that, since like 2000, since about 2000, 2001. And so more than that. But these are a list of drugs to avoid for people 65 and over. And why 65 and over? It's kind of arbitrary. I'm 54 and I avoid them. So I think that if you're worried at all about your brain, that you try to avoid these medications. And they aren't all focused on the brain. Some of them are heart and renal or kidney drugs. They're all kind of drugs that they recommend. Now, what I'd say is never stop taking a drug just because it's on a list, because drugs need to be tapered. So for instance, if you're on a benzodiazepine drug and you stop it quickly, that's really dangerous. So never stop a drug just because it's on a list. But these are drugs that you can look at to see what ones might impact your brain health. And they're called the Beers criteria. And the reason they're called the Beers criteria is not because we like to drink beer, but it's because the author of these was Mark Beers. Who's heard of the Merck manuals? Any? So Mark Beers was the very first geriatrician at Harvard. He was a good friend of mine, and he's been doing these criteria since the 1990s, and Mark died at the age of 54 of diabetes. He was a wonderful guy, and this was his life's work, and we're trying to continue it. The other thing I want to say a lot about is this thing of feeling connected and having purpose in life. Guess what? That is also connected to good brain health. And is anyone here, and I don't work for the AARP, but are you members of the AARP or interact with the AARP? So AARP actually has a ton of nice resources. They have and you don't have to join the AARP to use their resources. They have a whole series now on caregiving that are videos, very practical videos of things to do. But the other thing they have is a new program, because they think this is so important. They have a new program. It's called Connect to Effect. They also have a program called Experience Score, where they help people in their 80s and 90s become connected to the community, become connected to intergenerational to improve their brain health. So things like volunteering, getting a pet, using technology, but that is kind of mixed, or teaching someone, again, back to, I think it was Carolyn that talked about the crystallized intelligence, so sharing your wisdom. Connect to Effect, so check that out. There are also other things that the report went over, and I don't have time to do all that today, but I will say there's a little bit of evidence for cognitive stimulation and training, so there is growing evidence for that. Arts, music, mindfulness. Does anyone here use mindfulness? There's a whole group at Penn State now I see a couple hands in the back, a whole group at Penn State now that's studying the impact of mindfulness on brain health. And we know that there is some connection there, but we need more studies. There's also something called transcranial direct stimulation that you could find out. I'm going to go over this one quick, but just to say that when we talk about dementia, that many of the things I've talked about are similar. We know that age is the most important risk factor for cognitive decline in dementia, but we also know that age doesn't define you having it. So remember that chart of people in their 90s that some of them improved? So if you think about trying to do some of these things, maybe just choose one or two to work on. It will make a difference despite age. Again, years of education, having depression, sleep. Sleep is a growing area. We actually are actually beginning to understand why sleep is important by using animal models. So as we sleep, it appears that one of the things the brain needs to do as we sleep is it needs to clean itself out. Can you believe that? So the brain is actually full of stuff all day. And one of the reasons we need to sleep is that the brain probably helps us clean out amyloid plaques, amyloid in protein, in top protein. So there's some work doing that. So it's very important to get a good night's sleep. And again, the Mediterranean diet, smoking, alcohol, and you're probably going to have questions about alcohol, and we can talk about that. What I'd say about alcohol is, yes, there are some studies that show a link between like red wine and some consumptions of alcohol and a decreased risk of dementia. But we also know that abusing alcohol, and sometimes even small or moderate amounts of alcohol, especially for women, leads to poorer brain health. So alcohol is really a mixed bag. We're going to talk a little bit more about delirium because that's our work. So what is delirium? Has anyone ever heard that word before? A couple of you. Great, good. I'm impressed. So delirium is an acute, usually temporary state of confusion. And what we know about delirium, so dementia we know comes on over months, right, in years, and it's progressive. And right now we have nothing to stop it, that we have lots of things to help improve the quality of life with people with dementia, but we don't have a way to stop it. But delirium is important to think about because delirium is when you have confusion that's actually preventable, reversible, and has a cause. These are sort of the four key features. Problems with inattention, problems with disorganized thinking, and altered level of consciousness. So someone that suddenly, maybe if you're a caregiver, someone that is at home and suddenly is staying in the lounge chair a lot, is not moving around as much, is not eating as much. And you think, oh, maybe they're getting sick. That is maybe the impact on the brain with the delirium. We've done a lot of study here at Penn State, and we have a collaboration with Harvard where we have found that allowing people to have delirium or delirium on top of Alzheimer's disease leads to very poor outcomes. It makes the Alzheimer's disease worse. It makes them more likely to end up in a nursing home. It makes them more likely to fall and actually increases their risk of death by 25%. So it's important to think about delirium, especially if your loved one goes into the hospital. See, these are some of the common causes of delirium to consider. Remember I said delirium was reversible and it had a cause. And I like to sort of think like the top three. So we often remember in threes. So the top three would be medications, infections, and dehydration. Medications, infection, and dehydration. So pretty simple things. Also impaired oxygenation, pain, and many others. For instance, falling and hitting your head can cause delirium too. These are some of the examples of medications: sedatives, anxiety medications. And again, some people need to be on anxiety medications because it's generalized anxiety disorder is the most common disorder in the United States. So I'm not saying stop those medications, but be aware that they can cause delirium. Zolpidem, which is a common sleep medication, can cause delirium. So what are some of the things that you can do to prevent delirium? What if a family member is going to be in the hospital or you? Delirium can occur anywhere. It can occur at home. It can occur at a nursing home, but it most commonly occurs in the hospital. It's very common in hospitalized older adults and people that end up in the hospital. So we also know that just having your senses impaired can cause delirium. So not having your glasses on, not having your hearing aid, not having someone able to interact with you can cause delirium. So bringing these things to the hospital, bringing familiar objects. So if you have a family member that you already know has some cognitive impairment or some dementia, bring things to the hospital that are familiar that make them feel comfortable or calm. And then keep physically active, and we'll talk about how to do that, even in the hospital. Avoid sedatives or tranquilizers. So I know when people get in the hospital, right, they say, I'm nervous about being in the hospital. I have surgery tomorrow. Give me that sleeping pill. Is anyone brave enough to admit that they ever feel that way? I am. I mean, when you're in the hospital, that's a stressful time, right? But what I'd say is try to avoid that sleeping pill. We've actually done studies where we show that if we do things like give people warm milk or warm herbal tea and a back rub and relaxing music and don't give them that pill, that they sleep better and then they don't get delirium. So try to stay away from those pills when you're in the hospital. Try to sleep better. So tell the nurse, and I'm a nurse, say, don't wake me up at midnight to check my blood pressure. My blood pressure's fine, okay? Don't do that. Don't make all that noise outside my room. And if confusion does occur, make sure that staff address it. And don't address it by giving you more pills. Make sure that staff are aware, like, look, I feel confused. And sometimes people are often aware of that, by the way. Or, I'm seeing things. Or my mom and my mother was in the hospital and confused. I say, this is not my mother. This is the person she was. That's very important because, and I'm going to show you how to do that in a minute, but oftentimes what staff will see is, and I'll use my mother as an example, they'll see an older adult in the hospital, with their hair messy and they don't have their makeup on and they have a hospital gown on, right? And they don't know the person that you are inside, just like my son with a disability. So let them know who your family member is. This is one of the ways that we do this, and I can share this with you if you're interested, but we call it All About Me. It may seem a little childish, but it helps people know what things make you feel happy, what things make you feel upset. Let them know if you have hearing and vision impairment. And you can tweak this to put I've had other hospitals take this, for instance, and they have one that says, what matters to me about this hospitalization? Because that's really what it's about, right? And what matters to you might not be that you get this thing cured. It might be that you make it to your daughter's wedding, or that you can do the things that you love. So let them know what concerns you the most about the hospitalization or your family member. I said I'd talk again about walking. Thank you, Max. So I will, is that even when we're in the hospital, we have to stay moving. This is a scale that's used a lot at Johns Hopkins. Remember I told you this is the place, and I think Vanderbilt does this too, that even when people were in the ICU and you think they're really sick and you think, oh, just let them rest. Remember we used to have, I have children, so I'll say, when my mother would say when they went into the maternity ward and had their babies, they got to stay there for 2 weeks. Remember that? Does anybody remember that? And what we realize is that laying still, believe it or not, for hours and weeks at a time is really bad for you. So even when we're in the hospital, we try to give people the optimal amount of mobility for them. And this is one of the ways we do that. It's a scale called Daily Mobility Calculator. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit in the 10 to 15 minutes I have left before questions and more coffee, and feel free to get up and get coffee, is to tell you that we have a lot of work going here at Penn State on the area of cognition and dementia. In the College of Nursing, dementia is actually one of our main expertise, and not just dementia, but subjective. We also study normal brain health, and I hate to use that word, but healthy or cognitive aging. By the way, that's the reason we use the word cognitive aging instead of healthy or successful. I hate that word successful because that implies that those of us who have disabilities or have medical conditions somehow aren't successful, right? And that's not true. So I don't use that word. Language is important. But anyway, we do a lot of work on cognition, and we do it all the way from helping people with severe dementia have quality of life and seeing the person that's still there, from people who are my age that say, I can't find my keys and it's driving me crazy. So we actually have a study where we interview people about, and that's done with Nikki Hill, where she has an app that she's developing, and she interviews people about subjective, everyday complaints about memory. Does anyone have everyday complaints? Maybe I should say, does anyone not? Does anyone have everyday complaints about memory? Yeah, so she's studying just everyday subjective complaints. We have a big study that we're doing, and I actually see some of the, research, my research team is there in the middle. You guys want to call out yourselves? So this is a study that we're doing. Remember I said, so one of the things about delirium, again, we know delirium actually costs $162 billion a year, by the way, so if there's any health economist in the room. It costs as much as congestive heart failure and diabetes. Delirium is way underlooked, so I hope you leave here today and you know what delirium is now and you know to pay attention to it. So we said, how can we help nurses and doctors pick this up really quickly? And I had a year sabbatical, which I did at Harvard in their School of Medicine, and we came up with this screen. And it's very simple to do, and it's very simple to train. It's please tell me the day of the week, which I know you all know, and please tell me the months of the years backwards. So what I'd say is the next time that you do a flight from Europe, or you're sleep deprived, and you've been going all day, try to do months of the years backwards, starting with December. It actually takes some attention. I see some of you trying to do that right now, aren't you? I was giving this talk with my good friend Jane McDowell, who's not with us anymore, and I had just came back from Ireland, and I was doing it to a bunch of students who it's very important, more important, like I'm almost done with my career. What's really important is that the students know this. And so I'm telling the students, and I said, oh, I'll do this for you. I'll show you how to do it. And I'm like, December, November, October. And Jane looks at me and she said, you're really tired and you're getting stuck, aren't you? So it does take attention. So what I want to say about this is it has over 90% ability to pick up delirium when delirium is really there. So this is something they can use in the hospital. What it doesn't have is specificity, so it has what we call false positives. But that's okay, because remember I said delirium can kill you. So you want to pick it up. And if you pick up a false positive, that's okay, because then we have another tool that they can do to make sure it's really delirium and not something else. And just to show you, I had to show you a little data, right? And we have many papers on this. We have a paper with 140 older adults. This was a small pilot. And the reason I showed this is that we were able to show that we compared physicians, registered nurses, and nursing assistants. Who did the best? Not the physicians. Sorry, this is a really small sample size, and we have a sample size of 140. But actually, what I want to point out is patient care techs or nursing assistants were able to do this with 100% reliability sensitivity. And then the same thing with the two-step protocol, which is if they fail it, we do something else. So what's next with this? We have a large-scale study. It's funded by the National Institute of Health for over $2 million. And the goal is to validate this in over 250 older adults. We actually, I think, are over halfway there validating. We're working with a health economist to say, who does this best? Maybe it is the physician. Who should do this? Because we know that there's a triple aim of better health, right? It's better quality, better satisfaction, but we also have to worry about cost. So we're looking at the cost of this. And we're about halfway through. We also do interviews with the clinicians and doctors that are doing this and say, how's the app working? Does that app look good for you? How can we make this better? How do you do this at the bedside when we're asking you to do a million other things? So we're trying to help implement it into the real world. And again, this is a collaboration with the Harvard School of Medicine. I'm the co-PI with Ed Marcantonio, and again, some of our research team is in the audience. To find more about READY, I can send you the slides, but we actually, on the College of Nursing website, have a description of our study, and we have a video that shows you how to do the UB2. It's a little Wismosin video, but I'm not going to do that today. We also have something called NIDIS. NIDIS is an international network of people who are doing delirium research, and I'm the mentor. I'm the lead on the mentor core. We have a core on collecting data, on measurement, on mentoring, and dissemination. We have a delirium boot camp that we just held here in October in over half of our attendees. So this delirium boot camp is to build the next generation of delirium and dementia researchers. And we had people from Canada, from Brazil, from Argentina, from all over the world. And we'll have that again next year. And you can also find out more online. This was just, you can go to helio.com to find some of the papers that we've written, and I can also send you others. This is a paper, so if you're interested more, or if you have a loved one and you say, oh, they're going to be in the hospital soon, this is a paper by Esther O and colleagues, and it was published in JAMA in 2017. And it's a great overview on delirium and what you can do to prevent delirium. The other thing I'll say is, who cares about falls? Does anyone worry about falls? I am. So in a systematic meta-analysis review that we did, we found that a big cause of falls is confusion or delirium. And I know that's not only, there are many other causes like decreased muscles or people tripping over stuff. But in the hospital, that's a big cause. And when we did a bundle to prevent delirium, which is things like keeping them off the medication, mobilizing them, orienting them, engaging them, they were able to decrease falls by 64%. So good delirium care is good care, and it prevents falls. This is another one that it's free on helio.com, and it's things you can do like is knowing the older adults' goals, documenting their cognition in the medical record, and things we've already talked about. This is a whole list of, again, of cognition projects or studies that we're doing in the College of Nursing. And again, I'm talking about the College of Nursing today, but across Penn State, there's a lot of work being done in this area. I'm going to end by trying to bring all this together and tell you about an exciting new initiative that I'm involved in. And it's called the Age-Friendly Health System Initiative. The goal of this initiative, this is funded by the Hartford, who's put over $60 million into the care of older adults. Over $60 million. They care about this. And their goal is to have 20% of all health systems age-friendly by 2020. And that's about 1,000, because we have about 5,000 plus health systems. That they get the best possible care, that they aren't harmed in the hospital. Believe it or not, a lot of older adults do experience harm in the hospital, and that they're satisfied. Why? I think you know why. The demography, the complexity, and the fact that older adults are disproportionately harmed when they come into our health system. This is also led up by the Institute of Healthcare Improvement. Who has heard of the Million Lives campaign, or the campaign to decrease medication errors? Anyone heard of that? Well, that was also led by the Institute. I see Sarah nodding her head because she's in the healthcare system, but this was a thing to make healthcare safer, and to learn from things like engineering about how do we prevent mistakes. Well, the Institute for Healthcare Program is also leading this initiative, and it will be successful. These are some of our health systems, including Kaiser, Trinity, and others that are involved. And these are the 4 things we're focusing on. Guess what? They're all what we've talked about today in some respect. We're trying to make it simple, the 4 M's. The number one we start with is what matters to you, the older adult? What matters? What are your goals for care? What are your goals for this hospitalization? What are you most concerned about? That's the first question we ask. Not what we, the medical system, want, but what do you want? The second is medication. I've talked about that. Medications are really important. The third is mentation, and not just delirium, but also dementia, depression, and other things. And then the fourth is mobility. So this is a large national network, and these are the 4 things they've said are most important. We're testing it all across the United States. We already have almost 400 health systems. We're meeting in person in Orlando in December. And if any of you are here from a health system or you're a consumer, you can go to ihi.org to find more about it. But I hope you think about that. If you think about it, we have children's hospitals, right? We have lots of children's hospitals, but we have many more. Older adults will outnumber children very, very soon. So we need to have age-friendly health systems. These are the faculty. I'm part of the board and also a faculty member. So in conclusion, these are some things that you can stop doing for better brain health. Stop smoking. Try to avoid bad stress. Try to think about what things to really worry about and what those not. Avoid medications that hurt the brain. Some of the things to start doing is to exercise regularly. And the biggest thing I'll say about exercise is if you start an exercise program because of this talk, that might help a little bit, but your biggest thing for making it sustainable is what? Finding joy and finding something you can do easily. It's just like a diet. Most diets don't work because we cut out all the things that we really love to eat. And so exercise has to be the same. Even if it's simple, find something that brings you joy. If it's a walk in nature, even better, because we know nature helps the brain, by the way. So find something that brings you joy. Keep socially and mentally active. Get a good night's sleep. Eat well. This is part of our team on World Delirium Day. March 14th every year is World Delirium Day. I hope when March 14th comes this year, you think of delirium and think of ways to prevent it for better brain health. The other thing I'll say is that the words of Don Burowitz, who used to be the head of the Centers for Medicare. Does anyone know what Medicare is? And Don says that we need to improve the care of older adults and better manage delirium. We need to be all together or not at all. And the older I get in doing this work, that's the most important thing for me. We don't sustain things because of awards or grants or money. We sustain them because we care about them and because they bring us joy. We need to have competition, to not have competition, but cooperation. For when we are working together, for you, the older adult, we will achieve better care. And then I'll end with, the other thing I tell my students is, you have to know what your story is. Again, I've been doing this since the early 1980s, which I know is maybe not as long as some of you have been doing your work. And what I have found in doing that work is that you need to know your story about why you care. And I have a million stories, by the way, about caring for older adults with dementia who pulled the fire alarm where I was in San Francisco and I found out they actually had delirium. And those are the kind of things that said, I'm going to learn more about this problem. But I also have a personal story, and this is the part where I'll get choked up. But I have an adult son who by the time he's 40, will be at a 25% increased risk over all of us as having dementia. But I want to say that the Penn State football team does a great job of engaging them. And Penn State has a program actually called LifeLink PSU for when these kids age out of high school, that they can be socially engaged, they can be physically active to improve their brain health. And then the football team does things like pumpkin carving. And this is, I should know his name, I think it's Sean. Is that right? Sean Clifford? Thank you, one of our quarterbacks, who took the time to engage my son, and also Coach Franklin. So I'll end by saying, we are.
And at this time, we'll take a few questions. And I have my first question. So you said we should avoid stressful situations. Does that mean we should maybe not watch the fourth quarter of the football game today?
Yeah, I actually do shy away from that. You know, the issue, stress is a fascinating one, because we actually need some stress, and we call that eustress, EU. So like, you know, having this talk today, that was a little stressful, right? But that's actually good stress, because it engages your brain and improves your brain health. So you actually need some stress, and some people need more stress than others. But what you don't want is distress, and particularly things that are chronic personal stresses. So if you have those sort of things, you should seek help for those. And again, older adults get better about saying, you know what, that's not really important, so I'm not going to stay up at night worrying about it. Good question. Yes?
Is there a site where you can go and find out any studies that are happening here in Penn State where you can volunteer?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm trying to think of the profile. We do have a site called Profiles, and I think that's searchable. But if you email me, that's a great question. The other place you can go is a site called, I think it's CRISP with the NIH. So you can also go to the NIH and find out if there are any trials like on brain health or anything that you might be eligible for. But email, I think if you go to Profiles, but email me and I'll try to find a better answer for you. Great question.
You can also see research.psu.edu for current trials of all kinds of things at Penn State.
Super, thank you. I should have known that.
Years ago, I had an elderly neighbor who had to go live with her daughter, and her daughter would not allow her to bring any of her personal stuff besides her clothes with her. And it is so important as we age that we have familiar surroundings. And when you leave your familiar surroundings, your cognitive stuff just dives.
Yep.
And it's really important to have familiar things around you as you age.
Thank you. I think that's a super great point. I like to use the term when the hospital is an abnormal situation. So do everything you can, one, to get them out of there, but also to normalize the situation. So bringing in familiar things that make them feel comfortable. I mean, beds are really uncomfortable, so bring your favorite blanket, things to help you sleep better. Good point.
Yes, thank you for your talk. We learned some significant things that we kind of experienced with my mother-in-law, that regarding the difference between delirium and dementia that unfortunately was missed by the nursing home facility that she was in. Is part of your outreach going to be to really try to get staff from nursing homes to get better trained to recognize the differences so that they can appropriately deal with their patients?
Yeah, that's a great point. So we actually found out just what you said, is that nursing homes require certain kinds of education, and they actually do a pretty good job with dementia. But they didn't require delirium. And I think that might be changing, but for instance, I've given talks at Centercrest, which Having a son, again, with Down syndrome, nursing homes that have Medicaid beds are very important to me. I feel like we need to be in our own community. We have a relationship with some in Ebensburg where I gave a talk on delirium. If there's one around here that I can help with, I'll do my best to do that. And there are some studies. What we found actually with delirium on dementia is that almost half of those people came in with a delirium from a nursing home. So you're right. So we are trying to get out there, but know that this is an area that is greatly underaddressed, greatly underdetected, and there's a lot of nurses and doctors that don't even think about it. So it may not be that it was terrible care, but I'm sorry that happened, and I've heard other people when I give talks give similar examples. So thank you for sharing that.
We have time for one more question. Any more?
All right, well, thank you for coming out on a gray day.